Amy's Table. Today I'm talking with Rhonda Shires, founder of Bourbon Trails and Bluegrass Tales. We're exploring hospitality, purpose, reinvention, and why the most memorable experiences are often rooted in connection and a sense of place. If you've ever wondered whether your best chapter might still be ahead of you, this conversation is for you. This is Amy's Table. Pull up a seat. Rhonda, when I first met you, I was surprised to learn that you've got 30 years in hospitality and you oversaw operations in over 100 hotels.
Yes.
How did you end up shifting out of that? What was your path?
I had been doing operations for a long time in sales and hotels in general, and I began exploring Kentucky after our kids were a little bit older and we could go and do things again. And we had friends come in, and they were all college friends, and they wanted to do the Bourbon Trail. We had never done it since we lived here, and so I arranged a whole day of taking them out and exploring places, and I was the driver, and I didn't even drink bourbon. And I went out, and the very first place we went to was Buffalo Trace, and I fell in love with the stories and just the romance of it all, and not even the bourbon. And of course, in the beginning, it all tasted like gasoline, but I kept on going. Exactly. But if you just keep on trying, and I say practicing, you learn to love it. And after a while, working in corporate America forever, and that's all I've known, I just thought, I want to do something that I love, that is meaningful, that is purposeful, and that is a give back to the state of Kentucky, because that's kind of what I think of as my business. It's sort of a love letter to Kentucky.
I love that.
Yeah.
And you know what? I can tell you, having experienced it recently with you, you are definitely delivering a love letter
thank
to Kentucky.
you.
It's really beautiful. The other thing that I noticed was your hospitality approach is imbued in every single element of
Yes.
a day with you. And I love that. So Kentucky's sort of known for hospitality too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the stories are so great. How did you, it's an obvious answer, I guess, as I ask it, but how did you arrive at Bourbon Trails and Bluegrass Tales? How did you decide to include the stories and make that so woven in?
Well, that's what was important to me, because, again, I had never drank bourbon. It was not part of my lifestyle. I didn't grow up in Kentucky, and so I thought, okay, if I was coming in and to do it and I had never done it before, I might not just want to go hire a van driver and go on the Bourbon Trail, because Kentucky is so much more than that. And when I started researching everything, I realized it's so much more than just bourbon. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was the people and the communities and the craftsmanship and the artistry and the beauty, and most importantly, the stories. And that's what brought it all together. And so with my name, I wanted to make sure everybody knew it was bourbon, but it was also more about tales and the stories, and Tales, not
Right.
P-A, like horse tails. But I know it's a mouthful, but it's fitting to what I am. It's more
fitting.
authentic, and it's different.
When you travel to Europe, especially I think like Italy and France, the people that live there are so proud of their history.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like almost anybody could be an expert tour guide that's born and raised there. Yet you say you weren't born and raised in Kentucky, but you tell it with that same heart.
Yes.
I mean, you really do.
Thank you.
And your stories, I laughed. I said to people when we were in the van with you, it was like we were all going, "Can we have another story, Rhonda? Tell us another one." And I've been in the bourbon business. I'm no longer in it, but I've been in the bourbon business a decade.
Yeah.
And I hadn't heard some of these great stories, and they stuck with me. And
Yeah.
I've told them
Yeah.
since traveling with you.
Oh, good.
But it's funny, about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever, when bourbon really started ramping way up again. It's not like it hasn't been around for a
Right.
long time. You'd take people on a tour and they'd be like, "Wait, what? It's made with corn?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's interesting." Well, now so many people know the gist of how
Yes.
bourbon comes together, but you keep it fresh and alive.
Oh,
And one of the things that I loved so much, and I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to tell a little story.
Okay.
When you talked about how horse racing and bourbon were interlaced. I didn't realize this. Can you tell it kind of?
Yes, of course. Yeah. So it goes way back into the 1700s when Kentucky was still a part of Virginia, and it was Bourbon County, named after the Bourbon family that helped out in the Revolutionary War. And there were no interstates, there were no highways. The only way to get around was through the rivers. And so the whiskey makers would make their whiskey, they would put it into barrels, they would build a big flatboat, they would float it up the river, and the Ohio River was a main artifact of that highway. It was a primary source. So many of them settled along the Kentucky River. The Kentucky River is a very rare river that flows south to north. There are only 3 in Kentucky, and it's one of them. So they would float it up the Kentucky River over to the Ohio, take the Ohio all the way over to St. Louis, and then take the Mississippi all the way down to New Orleans. In New Orleans, it was a huge port. People were coming in from everywhere, selling their goods, buying their goods. So they would take their flatboat full of whiskey down there, sell all the whiskey, disassemble the flatboat and sell the wood because they couldn't get back up the Mississippi River. And the only thing they could do to get home was to walk through the trails. So
With a lot of money.
With a lot of money. They had bags of money because they just sold all of their barrels. So during that time, there were Native Americans, there were still British soldiers out there trying to, capture these people that were Americans. And so they would sell their whiskey, take this bag of money, and they would buy the fastest horse they could find because they would give them a better chance of getting back through Mississippi and Tennessee and back home to Kentucky without getting robbed or, disappeared. And so that's how all of these horses started coming into Kentucky. And most of them were thoroughbreds because these ships were coming in from these other countries, bringing these Arabian stallions and these horses. So they came back to Kentucky where they were eating the grass that limestone water fed, which was full of magnesium and calcium and nutrients. Not only did that limestone water make great whiskey, but it made great horses. And so as these thoroughbreds are coming back to this area, people were breeding them and they were realizing, my horse is faster than your horse. And before you know it, horse racing began in Kentucky. And ever since then, it's been hand in hand. It really goes together.
I just love that story. I don't know why I'm so incredibly taken by that story, but I am.
It's cool.
And we had the opportunity when we were with you to go to Keeneland to watch some practice, and that is an exciting experience as well. And talk a little bit about why Kentucky. It is thoroughbreds. I mean, that's our horses. Share a little bit about horse culture in Kentucky.
Yeah, so it's so important, and I like going to Keeneland. If you haven't been to Keeneland, it is something you have to do. But what I love to do is taking people there early in the morning when it's quiet, it's empty, there aren't a lot of people around, and you get to actually hear these horses breathing as they're running by you, and you hear their feet hitting the track, and it's just magical.
You don't only hear it, you feel it.
You
like
feel
you
it.
can feel the
thunder, yes.
Yeah, it's just beautiful.
It is, and it's such a different experience. And so if I have a tour where they want to go see horses, I try to always start at Keeneland early in the morning. And many of the horses stay around Keeneland year round because it's easier to stay in that spot than to, if they live in New York, then they have to fly here and fly there for their races. But if they're in the central location, it's a lot easier. But most of these horses are born and raised right here in Kentucky. And there are over 500 thoroughbred farms in the Lexington area.
Amazing.
It is amazing. But if you look back at the last 152 Kentucky Derbies, every single winner has been a Kentucky born and bred horse except 35 times out of 152.
That's amazing.
That's a huge number. So always bet on the Kentucky horse.
I love that. Well, and of course, this year, first female trainer, right?
Trainer, yes.
And we saw so many of her horses
You did.
working out, and that was so cool.
Yes.
And being able to, so quickly after watching the Derby, put together the fact that, oh my God, I've forgotten her name.
Cherie DeVoe.
Cherie DeVoe's horse, and seeing them go by. The other thing that really impressed me, and I think I mentioned to you, when you go to the ballet and you sit up close and you hear the dancers breathing, landing, jumping, you realize what athletes they are. Well, we know the horses are athletes, but you realize when you're up close that the jockeys are superhuman as they are riding these horses with their butts up in the air and they don't move. They're it's like, how do you do
They're on a rocket.
I mean, it was just so fun to see.
It is.
And from there, we went to Mills Farm, which was such a great spot. And
Yes.
I'm so taken by Alice.
I know. I love
the
her
woman
too.
who was the owner. So, can you share just a bit about Mill Farm?
Yes, yeah, it is an old farm. It's been in the family for many years. And it back in the early 1900s, the owner of the farm, everybody that has a thoroughbred farm in Kentucky, they want a Derby winner. That's the dream that they all want. And so he was raising these thoroughbreds, and he's actually one of the founders of Keeneland too. His farm, he owned many acres, and he got together with a couple of other people. They donated some of their land to actually build the Keeneland racetrack. They built Keeneland because they wanted to be able to not have to travel very far to race, but most importantly to sell their horses. If they wanted to sell any of their horses, they had to go all the way to New York. So they built the largest sales pavilion in the world, and still to this day, they still have the largest sales out of any other sale in the world. So people come in from all over the world every September to buy baby horses. It's called the yearling sale, and if you haven't gone, you've got to go. It's absolutely incredible. But Mill Ridge, he had 5 daughters, and his youngest daughter's name was Alice. And from the very beginning, he knew Alice was going to be the magic one that was going to take over everything. She was very hands-on. One of my favorite stories about Alice is when she was a little girl, he would be at work all day and he'd come home and she would push everybody out of the way and push him in the chest and say, "Me now, me now." It was her turn. And so he raised a beautiful thoroughbred. And in 1938, he named it Me Now. And Me Now actually raced in the Derby. Raced against Seabiscuit. He came in 3rd in the Kentucky Derby, but he raced also another time that year against War Admiral, beat War Admiral by about 8 lengths. So he was a pretty impressive horse. And from that point on, their reputation started to grow. Alice eventually took over the farm, expanded it, and she was really a pioneer for women in the horse industry. Right. She was one of the very first women to win an Eclipse Award, which is like an Oscar for horse farms and horse racing. She changed the laws about the breeding. Up until the 80s, women were not allowed in the breeding barn, which is crazy. Like, we don't know anything about reproduction. Right. And so Alice found some ways around that until she was able to change the laws. And from that point on, she also, one of my favorite stories is she bred a horse and foaled a baby that grew up to become an amazing racer. His name was Sir Ivor. He went into England in the 1960s and raced in the Epsom Derby, which is what our Kentucky Derby is based on. Hats, pageantry, all of it. Love it. And Alice's little horse, Sir Ivor, won the Derby. And she beat the Queen of England's horses, Queen Elizabeth. Well, Queen Elizabeth said, that's right. She said, "Who's this little lady from Kentucky coming up here and beating my horses?" And from that point on, their friendship started, and they became lifelong friends until the day they died. The Queen would come to visit the farm in Lexington. She had many of her horses raised on Alice's farm. She loved Keeneland. She loved it so much that they actually named a race after her. Oh. But it's just a beautiful story, and Alice went on to do so many things. Today, her son is running the farm, and he recently retired, and now her grandson is taking on the farm. And they're expanding and they're growing, and they're helping the entire industry, not just themselves. And that's what Alice would want.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love the friendship with Queen Elizabeth and Alice. I also would love someone to make a movie or write a book about Alice. Because to me, the story is destined to be a bestseller or, a big hit. I was so delighted to learn about her. Well, while we do know a thing or two about reproduction, we were allowed in that barn, and those boxing gloves for the mare's feet. Just tell everybody about those gloves. They're crazy.
It is crazy. So when thoroughbreds can only be bred live, so they call it live cover. There's no artificial insemination.
And I'm going to interrupt you. Somebody said to me when I was telling your story, I'm telling you, Rhonda, I tell your story everywhere.
I love it.
Somebody said, well, couldn't they just, shoot it up, and I'm like,
Nope.
not
Doesn't
in
work that
Kentucky.
way.
Yeah,
We do it the old-fashioned way.
right.
So yeah, it is a science, honestly, the way that it works. And breeding season for thoroughbreds starts February 14th and goes through July 4th. So starts with love and romance and ends with the bang. But from that point on, these stallions are breeding sometimes 2 and 3 times a day, and mares are coming from everywhere. So when they breed, the stallion stays put. The mare comes there to him, and as they're preparing her to go into the breeding, they do a couple of things. They put a leather blanket over her back that has little nubs on it because some of the boys like to bite. And then they put these boxing glove things on her back feet so that if she kicks him, it doesn't hurt him, because we got to take care of the boys, I guess. So, but it is a very old tradition, but it's actually, it's beautiful that they still do it this way.
It is
and
beautiful.
yes,
It is beautiful. And all of the care and record
Yes.
keeping and smarts and science that go on
Yes.
behind this is just amazing. I love it. So you'll take individuals, you'll take groups, you'll take corporate groups on these trips, and you have a sprinter, you have a small
Yep.
van. I recommend this experience a lot. Rhonda, we then went to Castle and Key.
Yes.
Had to throw the real bourbon into all of,
Of
this,
course,
right? And
of course.
What a beautiful spot that is. It is an architectural dream, and,
Yes.
and all the love and care. Had a great tour, saw how whiskey was made. But what was interesting is right down the road, there's a distillery that you actually take people to. Talk about
Yes.
that.
Yes, it's one of my favorites, actually. It's called Glens Creek, and it is the Old Crow Distillery. And they were making Old Crow whiskey there back in the 1800s, and that's where they made it. And during like the Civil War up until the late 1800s, Old Crow was the #1 selling whiskey in the world. Everybody was drinking Old Crow. The presidents were drinking Old Crow. The soldiers were giving little pints of Old Crow whiskey during the Civil War. So it was a huge thing, and it is such a historic, beautiful place. It is not pretty. There are distilleries.
It looks a bit like a scary movie.
It
set,
does.
to be
It
honest
does.
With you, but
Yeah, we have 2 different types of distillers. We have the glitzy and we have the gritty, and it is definitely a gritty, but it is so fantastic because the stories they tell there. I mean, you can just feel it when you walk on the property, and the owner, his name is Dave Meyer, and he's so fantastic. And if you ever go to Castle and Key, I always tell everybody, just take a little right out of there and just go down the road, not even a mile, and see it. You still see the old sign that says Old Crow. And Dave did some amazing things. He had the original fermentation tanks, which had all kind of been messed with because it sat empty for many
Right.
years. But fermenter number 5 had not been opened. So when he bought the distillery, he did a lot of research. The distillery was named in honor of Doc Crow, James C. Crow, that basically perfected the sour mash method of whiskey making. He was revolutionary in bourbon making in Kentucky. So when they were making the Old Crow, David, he researched all of the recipes and how it was made. He opened fermenter number 5 and dropped in a bucket of mash to catch some of the original yeast that was made during that time for Old Crow whiskey. And then he recreated that bourbon, and he has a bottle of it. It was called Cuervito Vivo. However, he was given a cease and desist letter from Jose Cuervo, and Cuervito Vivo means little crow in Spanish, and because that's what it's about, Old Crow. So he changed the name of it, and it's a bit funny. It's an upside down crow with his right wing giving the middle finger, and he calls it flipping the bird. So,
I love that.
so if any reason to go there at all, just get a bottle of flipping the bird. It's pretty amazing.
I love that. Well, I love talking to you. I love your stories.
Thank you.
I just talk about a pivot in a career, and what a beautiful pivot. It's like
Yeah.
you're living the dream, the Kentucky dream.
Yes.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Thank
Love
you.
talking with you today. And you know what? You can learn more about Rhonda at Bourbon Trails and Bluegrass Tales. And thanks for joining us today. And don't forget, you can always have a seat at Amy's table. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks to our sponsors too, Wow Window Boxes, High Street, and Jenny Simon Face. Please subscribe to Amy's Table and share this conversation with a friend. Follow along for more inspiration, gatherings, and everyday ideas from our community. Until next time, keep looking for the good, keep making room for connection, and remember, there's always a seat for you at Amy's table.